We are going to continue our discussion about ratios in section 7.1 to talk about equivalent ratios. In order to talk about equivalent ratios, we're going to use something called the means and extremes property. In words, this property states that if the product of the means equals the product of the extremes, then the ratios are equivalent. So if we have any two fractions, a over b and c over d, they are equal if and only if a times d equals b times c. And if we look at what we have here, we're multiplying diagonally, right? A times d and b times c. Right? A and D are technically called the extremes, B and C are technically called the means. I'm not too worried about that. What I'm most worried about is this next sentence that we have here. Right? In other words, two ratios are equivalent if and only if their cross products are equal. So we're going to cross multiply diagonally. Right? Another word for equivalent ratios is proportional. So we're going to talk about proportions in section 7.3 and in your homework. The homework on MyMathLab, you will see the word proportional in a lot of those problems as well. So equivalent ratios and proportional mean the same thing. All right, so what we're going to do here is we are going to multiply. We're going to find two products and then use that to answer our question. Okay, so in example A, 4 over 5 and 20 over 25. Are the ratios equivalent, yes or no? It must show work to support answer. All right, so we're going to start by taking this cross product. Right, so if we multiply 4 times 25, well, 4 times 25 gives us 100. Some of these you might be able to do mentally. Some of these might require a little bit of scratch paper to do. You do want to be working through all of these calculations by hand, not using a calculator. And then as we get to the bottom one, I'll show you, kind of give you a brief reminder of how to multiply with decimals. There is a bunch of review material that will also be posted in Moodle dealing with decimals and fractions and percents, so that way as we continue to move throughout the semester, you can review topics as needed. So there'll be notes in Moodle, there'll be some review assignments in MyMathLab. You're not required to do any of the review material, but just do understand that a basic understanding of fractions and decimals will be expected as we go through different sections throughout this semester. All right, now we're going to take our other cross product, so 5 times 20. 5 times 20, well, 5 times 2 is 10. We add a 0, we get 100. So what we do is we're going to compare these. These two products are the same. So are the ratios equivalent? Yes. Right? These ratios are equivalent, or again, using our other word, other terminology, they are proportional. All right, so for B, we're going to go through the same process. So we're going to start by multiplying. It doesn't matter which cross product you find first. I tend to do the one up at the top. So 9 times 5 gives us 45. Right, our other cross product, 15 times 4 gives us 60. In this case, our cross products are different. So we would say, no, these are not equivalent. Right, so for C, we're going to multiply 6 times 25. Anytime I'm multiplying with 25s, I tend to think of quarters. Right, so 6 times 25 cents, or 6 quarters, gives me $1.50. Right, so 6 times 25 is 150. And then we're going to multiply 15 times 8. Again, if you're not sure of the arithmetic off the top of your head, we can grab a sheet of scratch paper. 15 times 8. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 1 is 8. Plus 4 gives us 12. So 15 times 8 gives us 120. Right, so comparing these two products are not the same. So we're going to say no, these ratios are not equivalent, right? These are not proportional. All right, last but not least, I've included one with a decimal to practice. So as we're working through this one, I will go ahead and show the calculation right on this page, so that way if you take a look at it in Moodle, you'll be able to see the calculation and all the details. All right, so we're going to start with our first cross product. And we're going to take the 0.4 times 1.25. So I'm going to use this area at the bottom of my paper as scratch paper. So I'm going to take 1.25 times 0.4. It doesn't matter how we set up our multiplication. You can put whichever number on top, whichever number on the bottom. I usually do the one with the most digits on top and the other one in the bottom. Notice that our decimal points don't have to be lined up. We don't really care about that. So now we're going to start multiplying. So we're going to multiply everything by 4 to begin with. Right, so 4 times 5 gives us 20. Right, so the 0 goes down and the 2 goes up. 4 times 2 gives us 8, plus 2 is 10. So the 0 goes down and the 1 goes up. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. Right, so we have that there. Notice that I haven't done anything at all with my decimals. Right, I don't really care about my decimals right now. All I care about is doing the actual multiplication. Now, if this were a number other than 0, right, I would skip a place value and write my next product here and then add them up to finish it up. Again, if you want more of an arithmetic review, there's different material, different assignments that you can go look up. If you have a copy of the textbook, you can flip back to the first chapter. Goes through the basics, and then the fraction and decimal stuff you're going to see in the few chapters previous to this in the textbook if you've purchased one from the bookstore. Alright, so to finish this off, we're going to make sure we get our decimal point in the correct place. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to count the number of digits after our decimal points and our factors. So after our first decimal point, we have 2 digits. Right? So we're going to count a total number of 2 digits after that decimal point. In this factor, we have 1 number after our decimal point. That means in our answer, we're going to add these up. We need a total of 3 digits after our decimal point. So we're going to start here, and then we're going to count backwards 3 places. 1, 2, 3. And our decimal point is going to land right there. We generally like to put zeros before our decimal, so we can go ahead and add an extra 0 here. Just that way we don't have an empty spot in front of our decimal point. So then if we were to write out our product, 0.4 times 1.25 gives us 0.500. Alright, now we're going to multiply 1 times 0.5. Well, 1 times 0.5 is just 0.5. Right, now, if we compare these two decimals, notice that we have the same exact thing, with the exception of our first decimal has a couple more zeros than this one does, but those zeros don't make any difference. 0.500 is the same as 0.5, so we're going to say yes. These ratios are equivalent. This is something that is proportional. Right, so as you're working through the rest of the problems in your section 7.1 homework, if you're asked if ratios are equivalent or if they are proportional, then what we are looking for is our cross products. Are those two cross products the same?